It all started with a $75 fine slipped under my front door like a passive-aggressive flyer, the kind you get when someone's too cowardly to knock but too arrogant to let things go. And the paper was so poorly worded and smugly typed it almost made me laugh until I realized it wasn't a joke, it was real. Stamped with the letterhead of the Ashgrove Springs Homeowners Association, and signed by none other than Barbara Fields, the HOA president known around the neighborhood as Judge Karen. Because of her obsession with rules no one voted on and her love for fining anyone who so much as looked at their property with a hint of personal flair. And this time her problem was with a basketball hoop that wasn't even mine. It belonged to my nephew, who'd brought it over for the weekend, propped it up on the edge of the driveway so he and his cousin could play during a family BBQ, and apparently that was enough to send Barbara into a spiral. Citing temporary recreational structures visible from the street, a clause so vaguely written and outdated that even the original HOA handbook didn't mention it until she amended it to months ago in a secret meeting with her little squad of power-hungry enforcers. And while most people might panic over a fine like that, wondering what to do or how to respond, I simply set the paper on my kitchen counter, brewed a fresh cup of coffee, and smiled because I'm not just a homeowner, I'm a real estate lawyer, a litigator with 15 years of courtroom battle scars, and this was my house, my land, and now, it was personal. So I spent the evening pulling out the HOA's founding charter, every amendment, every annual meeting note, all public record thanks to state HOA transparency laws, and I found what I expected: sloppy legal procedures, unenforceable clauses, and most importantly, a paper trail of improperly recorded fines issued to several residents, including a widowed veteran fined for flying an American flag and a single mother fined for having a kiddie pool for 3 days during summer, all of which added up to a pattern of abuse and overreach that Barbara had been carrying out unchecked. Until now, and the next morning I mailed a formal notice of dispute to the HOA office, sent another to their management company, and filed a copy with the county just to make it official, which apparently rattled them more than I anticipated. Because 3 days later I received a certified letter claiming that due to non-compliance and refusal to pay, a lien would be placed on my home, and that was the moment the gloves came off, because not only was it illegal to place a lien without a hearing or valid debt, but they'd also filed it in the wrong jurisdiction, under the wrong parcel ID, using a template that hadn't been updated since 2009, and I knew because I'd written the updated version for the County Bar Association myself, and with that single misstep, they gave me everything I needed to burn them to the ground, legally speaking. So I drafted a cease and desist, served it by courier, filed a temporary injunction blocking any lien activity, and then, with the help of 2 former clients who now worked in the county assessor's office, filed a formal complaint with the Department of Consumer Affairs. And that's when things escalated faster than a toddler tantrum, because Barbara called an emergency HOA meeting to publicly shame me and rally support, but I showed up with a 3-inch binder, copies for every member, and calmly explained how every action they'd taken was in violation of state code. And when Barbara tried to interrupt, I politely asked her to cite the law that allowed her to override due process, which she couldn't, because there wasn't one. And then I dropped the final bomb to class action lawsuits I had quietly helped other residents prepare, citing illegal enforcement, emotional distress, and misappropriation of dues. And the room went silent, except for one old man in the back who clapped once before, muttering, "About damn time," and from that moment on, everything changed. Because Barbara's smugness melted into panic, the board fractured, and half of them started resigning within a week. But I wasn't finished yet, not until the lien threat was not only withdrawn but the entire abuse of power infrastructure dismantled. And as I walked out of that meeting that night, I knew Chapter 1 of this battle was done, but the real war over transparency, leadership, and justice was just beginning. The fallout from that HOA meeting was like watching a brittle dam burst. Under pressure it was never designed to hold, and though Barbara Fields tried to patch the holes with rushed apology emails, gaslighting Facebook posts, and an emergency community BBQ she co-opted from a local church group to try and rebuild her image, the damage had already been done, and I was just getting started because the fine was only the match now. The fire was spreading, and every improperly fined homeowner I reached out to had their own horror story, some quietly endured and some still unresolved, and with their permission, I compiled a detailed complaint with timelines, documentation, and names. Then submitted it to the State Attorney General's HOA Abuse Task Force, which most people don't even know exists, but I did. because I helped lobby for its creation years ago after a corrupt HOA in Denver went after a disabled veteran for installing a wheelchair ramp, and as that case file made its way up the chain, I continued dismantling Barbara's paper-thin legal foundation, starting with the lien she tried to file against me, which I formally invalidated through the county court, citing fraudulent filing procedures, a lack of due process, and misrepresentation of debt, and the judge agreed within 10 minutes, tossing the lien like yesterday's trash and sealing the ruling with a firm recommendation that the HOA review its internal legal review process, which was lawyer speak for "you're all incompetent." But the real turning point came when I audited the HOA's annual budget and uncovered nearly $18,000 in administrative costs that were completely unaccounted for. And when I followed the money trail, it led right to a private account used to hire Barbara's niece's landscaping company, which was charging the HOA triple the local rate for mediocre lawn trimming. And with this information, I filed a motion for a forensic audit and a special election, which, per HOA but could be triggered if 25% of homeowners signed a petition, which I obtained in just 4 days by knocking on doors, holding a town hall in my backyard, and letting people read the contracts and financial statements for themselves. And the outrage was instant, especially from longtime residents who had been silently enduring years of Barbara's regime. And during the next community-wide meeting, held in the local middle school gym to accommodate the turnout, I laid it all out on a receipt, every forged signature, every procedural error, and when I reached a part about the fake lien against me, the room erupted into calls for resignation, and Barbara, visibly shaken, tried to maintain composure, but the HOA's own treasurer stood up and admitted he had been pressured into signing off on expenses without review. And that was the final nail, because by the end of that night, 3 board members resigned, Barbara's niece's contract was terminated, and a temporary oversight committee was formed with me reluctantly named chair until official elections could be held. Though I never wanted to be in charge, I knew stepping up for a short while was the only way to ensure real change, so I took on the role, unpaid, with one mission: transparency, accountability, and legal integrity. And over the next 2 months, we rewrote major parts of the HOA charter, stripped the board of unchecked fine authority, implemented a 3-strike rule for non-compliance based on actual safety or community concerns, not aesthetics or personal vendettas, and, most importantly, created a public portal where every HOA expenditure, citation, and vote was published in plain language for all residents to see. And the difference it made was immediate. People started speaking at meetings again, asking questions, volunteering for committees, and reclaiming their sense of ownership over the community, which had been buried under Barbara's reign of petty tyranny for too long. And speaking of Barbara, her troubles didn't end with her resignation, because the state launched its own investigation after reviewing my complaint, and after a probe she was hit with charges of misappropriation of funds and civil fraud, which forced her into a settlement that required restitution and a public apology she had to read at a town meeting, which she did, red-faced and humiliated, while I stood in the back, not gloating, just observing, because I didn't fight this fight for ego or revenge. I fought it for principle, for the idea that no one should feel powerless in their own home. And as the neighborhood began healing, with kids playing outside again, residents decorating their homes without fear of fines, and barbecues becoming spontaneous rather than strategic, I quietly stepped down from the oversight role, passing the torch to a new board made up of balanced, fair-minded neighbors, not lawyers or power-hungry retirees, but teachers, parents, veterans, and one very enthusiastic grandmother who swore she'd fine anyone who tried to take down Christmas lights before January. And as I watched from my porch, sipping coffee while my nephew sank free throws on the same basketball hoop that started it all, I realized this wasn't just a win over a corrupt HOA, it was a blueprint for community restoration, one fight at a time, one law at a time. And while Barbara's name may eventually fade from the HOA archives, the lesson she left behind: don't mess with someone who knows the law better than you, Abu.